Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of SmugMug Live. I'm your host Alistair Jolly. As always, this show is brought to you by SmugMug and Flickr. So thank you very much for joining us. This is episode 91 of our show, and I'm really looking forward to inviting today's guest onto the show in a few moments' time. But before that, as always, we would love you to check out what we do at SmugMug and Flickr. If you're looking for somewhere to have an incredible portfolio and photo website online with incredible cloud storage and a fantastic e-commerce solution, then please check out everything we have to offer at smugmug.com. Or if you're looking to be part of an incredible photo community, then obviously check out everything we have to offer at flickr.com. I'm going to ask you to give yourself a little shout out in the chat. Let's make this as interactive today as possible. So give yourself a shout out. Let me know what part of the world you're joining me from. And of course, more importantly, if you have questions today for Dotan, then please post those questions in the chat window, and I will make sure to get through those questions at some point, probably at the end of the show, but if it's relevant, I'll ask those questions to Dotan. So let me tell you about today's guest, an incredible black and white street photographer, currently based in LA, and a tutor at Leica Akademie, at Leica US, and an ambassador for Nik Collection software from DxO. And we thought it would be a great opportunity to get Dotan Saguy on the show today. So without further ado, let's head over to LA. Hi, Dotan. How are you?
Good. How are you, Alistair? Thank
I'm
you for
great.
having me on the show.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. So it's
My pleasure.
it's about time we had you on the show, and really looking forward to having a little chat with you. To let the viewers know, what we'll probably do is have a little bit of a look at your work and let you talk about your work, and then Dotan is very kindly going to take us into some of his workflow processes and post-production techniques using, of course, Silver Efex Pro, your weapon of choice. And then we will, finish off the show by giving you a little sneaky look at a discount that Dotan has for some of his workshops. So let's see who's joined us today. A lot of folk in there giving themselves a shout out. Bob joins us today from Cary in North Carolina. Raymond is joining us from the Netherlands. Hi, Raymond. John is back again. Hi, John. Joining us from Dog Pound in Canada. Kevin is in North Cal, wine country here. Not on fire today. I'm so glad to hear that. I'm really pleased to hear that North Carolina is not on fire. Laurie says, hi, Alistair, Southern California. Hi, Laurie. Welcome to the show. Jim D is joining us from Chicago, and Mario is joining us from Malta, wonderful part of the world, beautiful island. So thank you to those who have given themselves a shout out, and a really nice international crowd that we have here. But you're a bit of a traveller, Dotan. You've been around in your career and lived in various parts of the world, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I grew up in France, actually. And I lived on the East Coast for a while, and now I live in California. And I've traveled a little bit, not over the past year too much, but otherwise I'd love to travel, absolutely.
And you've been a Parisian in your life as well, right? You spent a lot of time in Paris.
Yeah, that's kind of how my street photography started. I went to Paris. Well, I lived in Paris my whole childhood and adolescence, and then came back over a few summers back in like 2010-ish, 2010, 2015, and really took to street photography there and continued that in LA.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world. If you're going to do street photography, there are a couple of incredible places in the world, and Paris is certainly one of them. Very different vibe from Venice Beach, but
for sure.
Cool.
But it's a great place for that, and it's a great place for black and white. And there's a whole history, obviously, there of humanist photographers from the 20th century that it's just a huge inspiration.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part. Hopefully we can get back there soon. We are obviously delighted that you're a Flickr Pro user as well, and we've got some of your images lined up today on your Flickr account so that we can use that to showcase some of your images. But I described you as a black and white street photographer, but how would you describe yourself? Is that close enough?
Yeah, I think that's close enough. I mean, I kind of straddle the line between street photography and documentary photography, but to me, they're all. I would say street photography is just a big part of documentary photography. You're just documenting the street, and maybe you don't need as much access as for some of those other documentary projects. But I like to do both. I like to tell story with the camera. So whatever you call that, whether that's street photography or documentary, that's what I do. And
So
black and white is definitely my weapon of choice. Or
yeah,
I do shoot some
medium.
color. Yeah, exactly. That's really my preferred medium, and Silver Efex is a big part of what got me deep into black and white, frankly. So we'll explore a little bit of how I use that later, but yeah, it's a very powerful tool.
Yep. So maybe, yeah, storyteller. That's maybe the best way. There's a lot of photographers. That's how they describe themselves. But let's pop over to your Flickr account, because you've put together
Sure.
a couple of albums for us today on your Flickr account that we can have a little
Correct.
look at your work. And what better album to jump into than Venice Beach, right? Because it's
Right.
are you close to Venice Beach? Is that where you live?
Yeah, I am. I live about 20 minutes by car from Venice Beach, so I'm there as much as I can. It's a very, to me, it's a very special part of LA. It's kind of an anti-LA almost. It's like on the opposite of Hollywood and Beverly Hills, and kind of the glitzy part. It's kind of the antithesis of that in a way, and that's what I love about it. I love LA too, but this is Venice to me is my favorite place to be in LA,
And when
to
you're
shoot for sure.
when you're wandering around Venice Beach, what is it that you're looking for? Is it literally just trying to find a story to tell?
Yeah, I find, so I should back up a little bit and say that when I started street photography in LA, I sort of had a little bit of a list of places that I would often go back to. And, those included, the downtown with all the famous, spots, the Grand Central Market and, these kinds of places, and the Flower Market and Flower District and things like that. And of course, Hollywood Boulevard and Beverly Hills, and there's just a lot of places that are very iconic in LA, and Venice was one of them. So it was kind of part of my rotation of places to go. And after, I think, maybe probably a year into doing this on a regular basis, I was, I'd be like looking at my list and say, where do I go today? And then I'd be like, I just want to go to Venice. I kind of had, I guess I felt like a stronger connection with it. I felt like I was more successful there in finding moments that I liked, that really spoke to me. And yeah, I think there's just a vibe there. The people are more open, and just they're there to just meet other people and talk, and it's help each other and so on. It's just a much more open vibe than a lot of the rest of LA, where people a little bit more, like if you go to Beverly Hills, everybody's sort of on their guard, like, what do you want from me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But Venice, it's just a much more open place. So from a photography standpoint, I thought it appealed to me a lot more, and I ended up just going back there a ton, and I just kind of gave up on the other places. Not that I don't think there's great photography done in other places. Other photographers have done fantastic work in other parts of LA. It's just the part that spoke to me more on a personal level. So I think as a photographer, this is something that I actually encourage my students to do, is to really look at this as, you can look at other people's work for inspiration, but I think you have to look into yourself to see what you connect with better. So I think a lot of it is introspection and just what appeals to you. You're there to have fun and enjoy yourself. And if you don't want to force yourself to do something you don't feel is natural. So I think
and
you
maybe
wanna,
the story would look forced if you tried to do that. And I think many of us
right.
on our cinema, sort of photographic journey, we'll try lots of different genres, and we'll try lots of different
Right.
styles, and eventually you find the one that connects with you, and then
Right.
you've even found a place that you need to help tell that place in the way that you want to do it. So yeah, now, and especially enjoying it. My goodness, if you can enjoy what you do, that's
Right.
the
Well, that's
the
always
huge win.
when that's I make my best work when I'm enjoying myself. Exactly. I can't force myself to do something and expect something good to come out of it. So absolutely, that's a big part of it.
So tell us a little bit about this photograph that's currently on the screen. This is a very interesting photograph.
Yeah. Well, see, these guys were actually people that, if you go often enough to a place like Venice, that's not a very big place, by the way. Venice Beach, and it's a boardwalk that's, a couple miles long or something like that. And you bump into the same people over and over, and eventually you start engaging with some of them, and knowing some of them. So these two guys were actually had like a little T-shirt shop that's no longer there anymore. But they were, they would hang out and smoke pot and just sell their T-shirts and goof off a little bit. And so I just usually I don't I do candid photography for the vast majority of what I do. This was one where they were just goofing off and kind of playing the tough guys a little bit one day, and I was like, oh, that's I wasn't photographing. We were just kind of chatting. I was like, let me grab my camera. This is like kind of a interesting moment, and I like the smoke in his eyes and everything.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit less candid than the kind of stuff I usually do, because they were definitely playing to the camera that day.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like go here and it was also in front of tattoo shop that has like a fantastic mural, so that I thought that could look pretty good.
Yeah, it looks
But
great.
yeah, the thing is, you end up having that connection with some of the characters if you come back to a place often like this, and you develop those connections, and people trust you, and people that they're also excited that you're gonna take some photos because they know that you're gonna share them, and I try to do a good job at following up with. So it's something they appreciate, and the next time you come, you get even more of a invitation, and more of a you get a better connection over time that lets you do more work, more in depth. People open up. So
definitely love the smoke. You can, but I love the fact you can see his eyes and the details there. I
Right.
think that's kind of critical. So these two, they're playing a little bit of a persona here rather than just being themselves.
Yeah, I think they're often like this. There's a lot of show that's going on in terms of how people present themselves and so on. So I mean, this is not like unnatural for them, but they were definitely kind of playing it up a little
Playing
bit.
up a little bit.
And and I love the tattoo, the Superman tattoo, and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Like the people have such great tattoo work done there that it's great to be able to showcase it, and just juxtaposing that with the mural in the background, I thought was cool there.
It's really good. Yeah, some great detail in that image. A lot of stories within stories in that one for sure.
Right.
This is another really interesting shot with your treatment, and let's talk about your black and white work, because having spent a fair bit of time in Venice Beach, it's a pretty vibrant, colorful part of the world, and especially with the graffiti, what people are wearing, the beautiful blue skies. Why, and what was it, and why is black and white your medium?
Well, so I mean, there's multiple reasons why I initially chose black and white when I did my book on Venice Beach. So this is actually a photo that's in the book. I can show the book here. That's just for reference, for context. So this is the book that came out in 2018, where that photo's from. But the reason I chose black and white when I did this work is I realized kind of halfway through the work, actually, that Venice was changing very quickly. But even initially, there was something about Venice that seemed very classic to me, and very sort of like the photos that was taken, if in black and white, could look like they were taken 40 years ago. There's a part of Venice that just didn't seem to change and had that kind of hippie vibe to it, but and I wanted to make a project about Venice and kind of freeze it, to kind of bottle it up the way it was, because I saw that after many years of being the same, it seemed like it was changing very quickly. There was a Starbucks that was opening on the boardwalk. There was a lot of gentrification going on. There were a couple of high-tech startups that had sort of taken over a lot of the buildings and kind of changed the vibe of the boardwalk. And so I wanted to try to spend a couple of years just trying to freeze it, and if it ever changed, which I wasn't sure if it was going to change or not, if it was resilient enough to kind of get through that phase, I wanted to just freeze it the way it was. And I felt like black and white was really a good tool for that. It really gave it that, some of those pictures, I can show them to people and they're having trouble figuring out when they were taken, and so that was part of it. And there's a lot of traditions and traditional sports and things like that came to be in Venice Beach. A lot of the modern skateboarding was invented there. It's a famous place for surfing. That's been famous for that for a long time. Bodybuilding and the whole, fitness movement was born there back, way back in the 20th century. So there's a lot of culture and sort of iconic stuff that I think really, I don't know, it pops better in black and white. And I think it also looks more sort of eternal when it's in black and white.
Yeah,
so I started my project actually going into it with a black and white camera. So I just really committed to black and white. I used the Leica monochrome from the beginning of that project, and that was the whole project was shot that way.
Yeah, so you don't even have an option, because the M only shoots in monochrome, so you don't even have the color raw file. It's completely black and white.
Yeah, the raw file. The raw file is black and white. The other reason, frankly, is I think black and white, and this is just kind of a self-serving thing. It's easier, and as you mentioned, Venice is very colorful. There's a lot of colors, and sometimes they're very dissonant. Sometimes a color can sort of be really distracting for an image. You'll have like the perfect shot that you want with this, perfect action, and it's like the peak moment and everything, but there's a guy with a red t-shirt that's like right behind, stuff like that. So shooting in black and white allows you to do all kinds of things to tell your story the way you want to tell it. And not that you're manipulating the image, everything I'm doing is really by photojournalistic standards. I'm not ever photoshopping anything out or photoshopping anything in or changing the scene, altering anything in any way. But you have the advantage of the colors not being distracting, and you can change the tones slightly to serve your, the story that you want to tell.
Cool. Your camera just switched. You switched to another camera there. Did your camera just die?
It might have. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Let me see. If
that one came in. So that one kicked in that you're pointing at just now.
Yeah. So that's my laptop camera. I don't know. The other one must have given up. Let me try to. Oh, you know what? Yeah.
Turn it on. Turn it off again.
It turned itself off. So let's see if I can.
See if we can reboot that.
Switch back to it.
This is always the joys of live streaming. There's always some little hiccup. So there you go. That's you back to your
there we go. I'm
handsome
back.
Best. Yeah. Right. Let's talk about these images because looking at this image, you're right. Unless you start analyzing, the sneakers or something, there's really not much to date this image, right? There's nobody's on an iPhone or anything like that.
Right.
And, the color just kind of makes it that kind of historic legacy piece potentially,
Exactly. So that's why I love black and white. And frankly, I admire photographers who really are masters of color. I think it just takes a lot of skill, and I think it's the Alex Webbs and the Jonas Bendixsons and those people are just amazing in how they use color. And I feel like I don't know that I feel like my work is I can really shine in black and white. I'm not sure I maybe one day I'll experiment more with color, but I feel like this is where my strength is. So
well, speaking of shining, these guys are all oiled up and shining nicely.
yes,
this is kind of behind the scenes of I guess a bodybuilding competition.
Yeah, so exactly. So I was backstage at this bodybuilding. They have one every year. Of course, they didn't have it last year, but they actually have 3 every year. So they skipped all 3 last year. And these events typically, this is, I think, a good tip, I think, for photographers in general. It's hard to usually what you do is you go, and you try to find a spot and you photograph the stage as people are doing flexing their muscles and everything. And all the photographers were on the other side, where really the most interesting stuff was happening backstage. And the backstage was actually open. So you could, I was actually inside the area where all the bodybuilders were, but you could even be on the outside of that area and get good, interesting shots. But that's where they were hanging out, and that's where the unguarded moments and the interesting stuff was happening. So to me, that was a lot more interesting than what was happening on stage. So I just stayed there the whole time, and so here, I just took advantage of the framing of that door. You can see a little bit of the public waiting for them, and to me, it seemed like almost like an ancient Rome sort of gladiator, scene, and with the guy opening the door and that sort of thing. So, and the other, you can see a little bit of the other people lining up, to get on stage to the left. So, I really like how this, the design of this, and it takes a lot of experimentation to kind of figure these things out. They're not immediately obvious when you're there, I think, especially with everything going on. But it's
what is that story? When there's so much going on, what is that singular story that you want to get? And I like that idea of these gladiators heading out into the Colosseum and they're all chanting in the background there. But it's also the sense of focus. The guys on the left ready to go out, you can see them kind of staring at the ground, getting themselves in the zone. But I also think the guy holding the door seems so disinterested as well. It's quite a juxtaposition.
Right, he's just doing a job. He's just doing a job.
Hurry up and get out. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's but I think there's a lesson there that often I tell my students if you want to sort of stand out in your street photography, you can't be too deadpan in terms of or literal in terms of how, showing people exactly what they normally would see in the street. That's just not interesting. I think a lot of interesting photography, street photography, is when you can show something to people that's different. So not necessarily shot at eye level, although here it is, but it served it here. It was okay to do it at eye level, but a lot of my photography is not done at eye level for that specific reason, because people see at eye level by definition. So, trying to get different, usually you would take this from the front. So I took it from behind and showed people something that normally they'd be in the audience, and so here you see a little bit of the other side of that coin. So I think a lot of that interesting street photography is when you can find those angles and those perspectives and those designs that are different from what the normal person would see on the street.
Yeah, speaking of some of those kind of angles, I'm going to go back to the album because obviously there's a lot of images in here, but I'm going to scroll down here because talking about angles and perspective, this is a prime example of just that, right? It's just a normal day in Venice Beach, right? A lady with her snake.
That's right. Yeah, so this is the one you saw that was on the cover of the book. So yeah, that was a really interesting interesting scene that actually happened very early in my project. So I had no sense of context for like, is this just happening all the time in Venice? And I haven't been enough to, and it turns out, I mean, this is the only time I've ever witnessed this, including after the making of the book and everything. So it was a very unique scene. Yeah, it was a funny moment where it was a street performer who had left he had entrusted his 2 giant boas to this mom and her 5-year-old. And they knew each other, but not very well. And he was like, just play with the snakes in the sandpit for a while. I'll go grab a coffee and I'll come back. And so I bumped into, this is actually one of the very first shots I took, but I stayed with them for like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and I bumped into Jenna, and she was on the ground with this giant boa, and she was just kind of observing it. She was just really close to it. And so I asked her, I was like, I'm doing a project on Venice. This is like an amazing scene. Do you mind if I take a few photos? Just don't mind the camera. Pretend I'm not there. Just do whatever you were going to do. And if you don't mind, I'll just stick around and I'll share the photos with you later. And so that's what I did for the next 40 minutes. And so there's actually 2 photos from this scene in the book because I like this scene so much, and so much good stuff came out of it. But it was quite surreal.
Yeah, I love the angle though, and I love the leading lines of what I'm assuming are parallel bars on the beach.
Exactly.
There, and
exactly
just the low angle, and the palm trees which set the scene very nicely. It's just all works really well.
Yeah, I mean, going back to, in Venice, there's a lot of distracting elements. There's palm trees coming out of everywhere. There's the people. It's just very, it tends to be very crowded on a summer, especially summer weekend. And so getting low actually has a lot of advantages. Shooting from a low angle like this, you really get people's head to pop much more against the sky. And then you get, as long as you don't intersect with palm trees, you're okay. So you kind of have to pay attention to that. But yeah, it really does help. I think, I forget who it was who was teaching this. I don't know if you know Sam Abel, National Geographic photographer, teaches a lot. He's a great photographer. That was one of the first thing that I remembered from one of his talks, was just try to get people's heads above the horizon and see what difference it makes. And I've always done that ever since I've heard that talk of his, and it does make an amazing difference when you can. It's funny like how you look at the same photo with people's heads below the horizon line and above the horizon line, and it's just a completely different photo, even with a very slight variation in the angle. So that's something this is very useful.
Yeah, another great moment that you see a lot.
But there you go
on the beach. Yeah, just that low angle.
Exactly. Well, so that's another one where if I was at eye level, I would barely see their faces because they're like all carrying their surfboards. And the difficulty in some of these scenes, I mean, it wasn't there in the scene with the snake, but here it's moving. People are walking back from the beach. So some of these times where I often run into the issue of I have to be low but also walk back or run back in some cases while I'm shooting from a low angle. So that's why it makes me laugh sometimes when I see those camera companies trying to sell their flip screens, and how the flip screen has become like this big thing. Like people won't buy a street camera unless the screen flips out. I'm like, the flip screen would not have helped me out at all in the scene like this. Like I can't. It's just all moving too fast. I have to just. I'm not, and by the way, in a scene like this, I don't have the camera in front of my face either, because otherwise I'd be, it's like you can't run with the camera to your face and while you're running back at a low angle. It's just impossible. So one thing that I find really useful is to learn to shoot without looking through the viewfinder, and know how to angle the camera so you have the most chances of getting the shot. So when I'm running back like this, I'm actually holding the camera in my hand. I've got my camera here, sort of like this. Oh, sorry. And I'm just, triggering the shutter, and I've got all my presets, set up on the camera, but I don't actually look through the viewfinder.
So that
Yeah,
is sorry to interrupt, but that's that skill of knowing your equipment, right? And a lot of street photographers practice that technique of, kind of call it shooting from the hip a little bit, where
right,
the focal distance you want to be at, you know how to judge that, you can judge
right,
distance, you have the setting on your camera where you're able to have the markings for distance, which a lot of cameras don't do now, which is so frustrating. They don't have distance markers on them, or
right,
fixed stops for distance. So
right.
yeah, it's a really important technique to practice, right?
Yeah, and yeah, it really comes with practice. And so to me, like a good viewfinder or a good screen is really not that helpful. Good autofocus is not help. I mean, I don't use autofocus at all. I don't rely on it. And as you said, all I do is I look at the markings on the lens, and I change based on, this person is 3 feet from me, so I'll just set it to 3 feet, and I'll try to walk back and keep the distance between me and them the same, and as long as the distance the same, I don't have to refocus. I can just keep shooting and not have to worry about the focus. So those are the kinds of techniques that to me are that they're the only thing that actually works when you're in those situations. You can't rely on flip screens or autofocus or any of those modern things that a lot of people obsess over. I'm like, I don't really need that.
Yeah, and then you also don't have the problem of the camera trying to kind of second guess you and try and do something that you don't
Right,
want it to do because you've just set it. And
right,
great techniques for those of you that haven't practiced, shooting without looking through the viewfinder is, just without even having a camera, is just look at something and make make an estimate of how far away from you is it. Like, is it 3 feet? Is it
right,
5 feet? Is it 2 meters, 6 meters, whatever, and just start working out and just get your eye accustomed to judging depth, which is something we don't really
right.
practice much.
There is one catch in doing this, and
Hmm.
I think it's another thing that I think has been lost a little bit, is you have to really learn your lens, and you can't really do it with a zoom lens. Like, it's really where you have to use a prime, and to know your focal length, to know exactly instinctively what that focal length will render through your eyes. And so I only shoot with a 35 millimeter, and that's one of the reasons why I only shoot with a 35, is because I know exactly what angle of view I'm going to get, and without looking through the viewfinder, I can take the photo and angle the camera in a way that I'll get the shot. So it doesn't always work. Obviously, I make some mistakes, but a lot of times it will work, and it will give me a completely different angle that I would normally have gotten from looking through the viewfinder.
Yeah, and here's another great shot that I've just pulled up. Again, talking about all the different things that you've spoke about, the low angle, losing all the distractions, movement that you're having to deal with, but really telling, in my interpretation of it, a very different story due to the silhouette nature of the image.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I really love that design that you get from shooting from that low angle and shooting against the light. So the photo that you were showing earlier with Jenna and the snake was also shot backlit. And one of the things, just to close the loop with, to Silver Effects, that I really love, is that you can retrieve a lot of detail from the shadows. Granted, you're shooting raw files, which you should always be shooting raw files. I don't know if you can see, even in the silhouette in here, you can still see some detail. And
Hmm.
I could have brought more of that detail out if I felt like, creatively or like artistically it was working. Here, I really wanted to emphasize the silhouette, so I left it very, very dark, but with still some detail in it. And with the snake photo, I wanted a lot more of the detail of, to see her face and her expression and everything. So that was, done a little bit different. But you have that I love shooting against the light because, again, people don't really see those things. It always goes back to what people are used to seeing. And I think what people are used to seeing, they can see on their own. They're kind of bored if you show them that as a photo. You know, it's always show me something I haven't seen. Show me something different. And you can do that, you know, by shooting against the light. You can do that by, you know, there's lots of different techniques to show people something they don't normally see. And I think it's a good thing to kind of keep in mind when you're looking for things to photograph on the street.
Yeah, cool. Right, before we get to your little practical demonstration of Silver Efex Pro, I'm going to jump to some of the questions that are coming in.
Sure.
A few folk saying hello because they're just getting here. Hello, Alan. Rich says hello from Florida. Running late. I'll have to catch up. Yeah, this just so that everybody knows, this show is obviously stays live on the channel, so you can rewatch this whenever you want at the same link. Evoke says great shots, nice old school techniques. I think Evoke just called you old there, Dotan, but hey, that's okay. I know he's.
I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah. There's two questions here that are quite interesting in that they kind of about the same topic. So I'll read out both of them. First one is from Gary, who's a long-time viewer of the show. Hi, Gary. Welcome back. Any tips interacting with people? How much do you try to talk to the people before taking a shot? But then the other question was earlier from Raymond, who says, do you experience as a street photographer more hostility when you photograph people compared to earlier times and previously? So what is it like working with people, and do you find anybody to be hostile?
No, it's very rare that people are hostile. The example I'm going to show, actually, the person was not really hostile. He was kind of joking around a little bit, but no, most people I approach, I usually, so I go one of two ways. Either I see that I can be completely invisible and still get the shot, and it's something I can get quickly, and it's not a scene I need to work for a long time, then I'll just get the shot and go. And it happens. You know, I do get some of those shots, and it's great. The ones I enjoy most, though, are the scenes where I can really get in there and work the scene. And the only way to work the scene, and you have to be allowed to stay. You can't just, just sneak up on people for, 10, 20, 40 minutes at a time. So those moments, when I feel like I'm going to need more time with this, there's no way I can just steal a shot and go. I need to engage with this person. So I need to make contact, give him a compliment, usually. That's always a good way to start, because people are much less likely to be hostile if they're given a compliment first. What kind of a jerk are you to tell people to go away if you're given a compliment? So, and people don't like confrontation. It's much harder for someone to say yes than no. I mean, much harder for them to say no than yes. So if you're asking them to whether you can take some photos. So I try to start with a compliment, just learn a little bit about them, and just, I also tell them about what I'm doing, so that there's no, to show them that my intent is, I have good intentions. I'm working on a project in Venice. Right now I'm working on a project of dogs in Venice. So it's going to be called Dogtown. Venice used to be called Dogtown back in the days, not because of dogs. It was, it's just kind of a nickname, because it's kind of a rough and tumble place. Anyway, so I explain what I'm doing, and I think the combination between candor, honesty, they're seeing that you're coming from you have good intentions, and you're giving them a compliment. Usually they're like, oh yeah, that's great. And then also I offer to share the images. I say, look, I'll share the images. Give me your Instagram or whatever, and I'll message you, and I'll send you what I've got if anything comes out. So between all that, I usually get very positive responses. I think it's also the place that you shoot at. I was mentioning earlier, Beverly Hills, maybe people are very kind of guarded and just they don't trust people easily and so on. Venice is just a much more open place. So it's even during the pandemic, I haven't found any problems shooting there, and people have always been friendly and so on. So even though it might seem, I think on the surface as a tourist, if you went to Venice, you would be more intimidated there than going to Beverly Hills. But if in reality, when you approach people, they're a lot more friendly and warm and accepting and so on than in other places.
Cool. Thank you for that info. Right. I think it's time for you to share your screen and let us see some of the techniques you use in your one of your favorite tools, Silver Efex Pro. So while you're pulling your screen up and sharing that with me, I'm going to ask everybody to do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. That way you'll be notified whenever we release another episode here on SmugMug Live. So thank you for doing that. It really helps support the show. It also helps other people find this show when YouTube suggests it to them. So let's head over to your screen, Dotan. There we go. So currently you're in Lightroom, yeah?
Correct. Yeah. So, and this is on a small screen. This is on my laptop screen. So it might look a little crowded, but it's not the screen I usually work on Lightroom with. This is actually, I'm going to show you a shoot that I just did a few days ago. So this was over the weekend. And just to show, before we go into Silver Efex and everything, just to show a little bit my approach. This was a person, I didn't ask anything. I didn't approach them. What I saw is a guy carrying a dog. So I was like, okay, well, that's different. So he was just carrying the dog like a handbag, pretty much. And, in reality, what happened is he was picking him up from the dog was like on top of a wall. And he was carrying the dog over to a balcony that was just a few feet away or a few dozen feet away. So it was just a short, easier way to just get the dog. But what I saw was this guy carrying a dog, and I knew who the guy was vaguely, and I kind of recognized the dog, and so I was like, if he asks or whatever, I'm ready to kind of go into my spiel. But for now, I just don't want to interrupt this, so I just started shooting. As you can see, I'm not composing anything. I'm just like getting sort of into the scene and trying to figure out what am I going to do with this. And I just kept on shooting just to kind of see, okay, he's at some point, like he's getting the dog up in the air, but I'm not separating the dog from the background, and I'm not happy with it. At the same time, I'm like, my mind is like going 1,000 miles an hour thinking,
sure,
what kind of story can I tell from this? And right when this is happening, as I'm shooting this, I'm like, I need some kind of a juxtaposition. This is not going to really work just on its own. So I'm going to go from the back and try to photograph it from the back and put it in the context of the rest of the boardwalk. And I got really lucky at that point because you can't see it just here yet, but another person was walking her dog and she was carrying, no, not yet. Okay, there she comes. So she's carrying a handbag, and he's carrying the dog, and she's got a dog too. So I'm like, okay, now I've got something, and I've got to figure out the moment. So then, this is the processed picture. This is the one I got two. I think, yeah, I got like a couple of shots, but I was trying to. It's really hard with everything, he's walking, so his foot stance is changing all the time. The dog is like swinging back and forth. Her foot stance is changing all the time. The other dog is also, so a lot of balls in the air, and I'm just trying to nail the moment. And so I think this one is the one I chose in the end. And here there's a couple of things going on. One is I was trying to really make it about the dog being carried and the whole handbag thing. And I really didn't need their faces for that. In fact, if you have the faces in there, it probably detracts from what I really want to show. So there's, again, it's about showing something to people that they normally wouldn't see. So this is the picture that I arrived on. You can see it might be a little bit underexposed. So I actually keep my settings like 0.7 to 1 stop underexposed,
Mm-hmm.
because if I blow out, I'm actually used to shooting with the monochrome, so this was actually not with the monochrome. This, I forgot. This is a very rare situation where I forgot my monochrome 300 miles away on a trip. It's safe somewhere. It's fine. I'll get it back. I'll get it back this weekend. But I was going to be without a camera for 2 weeks. So Leica lent me a M10R. So I was shooting with a color camera here.
You just lost your camera again, Dotan.
Oh,
yeah.
damn. Oh, you know what? It keeps, it's my regular camera that's just turning off. Maybe it's overheating. Yeah. I think it might be overheating. So, okay, we'll see how long it stays this time.
At least you have another one there that it falls back to. But yeah, I love the timing of the shadow on this one's really interesting as well compared to the other frames. Although you don't have the people's heads, you have the full person in the shadow as such, which I thought was kind of cool.
Right. Yeah. So I really didn't want the whole. I mean, I was really intent on not getting the faces or the heads. Plus, there's more distracting stuff up ahead. I mean, if you can look here in one of the previous ones, it's just a ton of kind of stuff I just wouldn't want in the shot that would be too distracting. So here, sometimes I shoot from the bottom up, and that's probably more of a common thing for me. But here, I wanted to shoot top down so that I would again get rid of all this other stuff I didn't want. So I was saying I shoot underexposed because, especially with the monochrome, but also with this color camera, if you lose the highlights, it's easier to lose the highlights than it is to lose the shadows. At least with those Leica sensors, they can go really, really deep into the shadows. You can always recover the shadows in post, unless you've really just completely underexposed it by like 2 or 3 or 4 stops. But by 1 stop, you get to keep all the shadows and preserve your highlights. Mm-hmm. So I always bring back the exposure in post. So see, if I get back my stop that I underexposed by, now it's fine, but I don't risk losing. And I mean, this photo didn't have any risk of losing highlights, but I don't lose the highlights. But what I do is, before I get into Silver Efex, I usually bring it back to what it should have been. So here it's about 1 stop. So I'm going to take this into Silver Efex.
While we wait for that to open, the process, you always start in Lightroom for kind of cataloging and finding your images and editing and culling and that type of stuff.
Yeah, so if I crop here, it's not cropped at all. But if I do crop, I'll crop in Lightroom. I'll do the exposure adjustment in Lightroom. I actually didn't show. Let's see if I come back to Lightroom. See, I look at the histogram, and if I can look if anything is clipped, by using these triangles. Like if I push the exposure, see how you really have to see the red is clipped here, the blacks are clipped. So I can play with it and see where I want that histogram to be, and then I go into Silver Efex. So in Silver Efex, I usually look at the presets that they have. There's a ton of presets. I have a few favorites that I tend to look at first, and unless I can't find something I'm happy with, I don't really go into the others. But I've favorited, like I've starred some of them, so I can easily back to just my 5 favorites as a starting point. So here you can see, even on that little contact sheet, type thing on here, you can kind of see. And what I'm looking for is, again, same as when I shot this, I come in with an idea for what I'm trying to, the story I'm trying to tell. And I think that's a really important thing with processing that people don't always have in mind. I think you think processing, you think I'm going to make this as pretty as I can. And to me, it's not really about making it pretty. It's about telling the story in a way that will be easily understood by the viewer. Because if the viewer will look at your photo for a second or two, and if they don't get it, they'll move on to the next photo. So I really want them to just get it. as soon as they look at it. So here, my story, what I'm trying to get through to them is the dog as a handbag. So the dog has to be somewhat recognizable. So that's one of my goals. And then juxtaposition with the handbag, the real handbag, and then the other dog, and like what a dog should normally look like. And then, you know, this guy is made into a little handbag. So that's what I'm starting from. And so if I take, I don't know, let's see, I know, look at like other presets. If I take a preset like, I don't know, like this one, like I can't make it, you know, like it's not easy enough to see that this is a dog, you know, in this preset. It might look very dramatic, but it could just be a handbag. Like I have no idea what this is. So there's not enough detail in a dog in this preset, in this way of treating the image. And then even this, it's hard to see that this is a person. You can barely see the top of it, the top of her. And so when I look at these, I really am looking for something that's going to serve my purpose for this particular image best. And here, I think this one actually is quite good because you can see the spotting and the detail in the dog. And I can tweak that some more. We'll see how. I've got this one. This is also quite good, actually. I don't know. It's sometimes there's a, like in this picture, there's a few that could work. So this is maybe too flat, not dramatic enough. I like to have a little more contrast. This is good. Actually, I'm going to start from this. It's called Wet Rocks. That's like one of their default ones. So this is not a custom one that I made. And so once I have that whole thing can go away. I can just use that little door thing icon here and just push the whole thing away so I have more space to work with. And then I start looking at, okay, what am I trying to do? So one, I actually like how this looks. Like this is almost one that could be saved just almost as is. But I want a little bit more detail in the dog. So I will go and, well, for one, I know there's some white in the dog. So if I push up the whites a little bit, I might be able to accentuate the contrast and get a little bit more of the detail in the dog. Plus I can see the detail in the person also a little bit more. So I like that. I also don't like to keep their tonality protection because it tends to make it, you tend to get more contrast by getting rid of these. See, so the highlight protection. So I want more of that full sort of histogram. If I go to the bottom, you'll see actually I like to show this in histogram mode. So you can see all the zones. What do you call them? These are the Ansel Adams, you know, the
zone system, yeah.
The zone system, exactly. So it's great that they have this here because you can see that, look, my zone 0, which is the blacks, has a whole bunch of stuff. But if I go to my zone 10, which is the whites, you know, this looks like it has a lot of whites and is very contrasty, but only that chair, you can see the little dots, only that chair has the whites. And I'm going to darken that chair anyway because I don't want it to look this bright. By the way, people's eye, when they look at a photograph, they go to the brightest area first. So if you have a distracting element that's very bright, you definitely want to remedy that in post. So, but what it tells me though is that my histogram, actually, I have stuff in every single zone. So, you know, I have stuff all the way to zone 10, and I've got some. So I'm good in terms of contrast. In terms of I want to sort of spot adjust, you know, show a little more detail in areas that I want to show detail in. So the dog, for example, I want a little more whites. So this is Amplify Whites. I'm taking that slider. I want it just on the dog. And I want a little more structure to show that it's a dog. Just, you know, like if you zoom in, you'll see the hair and everything. And we'll zoom in a second. I can show you more of the details. So if I go to the 100% zoom, I can work on the dog more precisely. But see how the ears are more, they would be more recognizable. So I'm copying. So I made that little control point, and with the what is it? I think it's the command key. I'm just doing it kind of by, yeah. Oh no, not command. Sorry, the option key on the Mac. I don't know what it is on a PC, but if I hit option and I grab that point, I can duplicate it, and I can, even after duplicating it, I could increase the brightness a little bit, increase all whites. Like I want that ear to show because that's one of the things that tell people it's a dog.
Yeah.
It could be small. So anyway, I'm not going to do this too long, but I put a few control points. The tail, the tail is really bright, but it's not. There's not a lot of contrast on the background, so I might make the background slightly darker, just so that you can. So that the tail. I don't know if people know the term figure to ground, but basically it's how something pops from the background. So here that tail didn't have enough figure to ground, so I'm like increasing its figure to ground by darkening the background just very slightly around it. And then I'm putting a spot on the tail so it keeps it is not dark. And see now there's more. So I can compare. This is before, after. If I go back, you also have, if you want to do the before after, you can also do this. They give you a few different ways of seeing what you're doing. Yeah. I actually prefer this way, where you're just kind of toggling back and forth, and you can see. But see how the raw. This is, I mean, it's kind of lifeless, and then you take it to a whole nother level with this. So that, and I'd do something like this chair, for example, that's, I could either crop it out in this case because it's close enough to the, that I could do that when I get back to Lightroom. But if I wanted to keep it, to just keep more of the frame, because I kind of like where the dog is positioned in the picture. I don't want to make it too close to the top. I can go in again into the chair and just throw a control point, and I can sometimes amplify white, bring that down works better. Sometimes brightness, the brightness thing works better. I really have to put it on here. It doesn't take it down by that much, but it does make a difference in terms of where your eyes go. Like you don't want it to look unnatural, where it's like, oh, someone's messed with this too much, but just so that it's not as prevalent in the kind of the hierarchy of the picture.
Yeah, just enough to knock those whites back a bit so that they're not jumping out at you. Yeah.
Exactly. So here, I mean, I could work around in terms of like, I like that figure to ground of the dog. It almost has like the kind of iconic, you don't see too much of the detail, but it's not about him. It's about this guy. So he's just like supporting character in this. And I think he's doing his job. I might want the, kind of the leg, that person's leg, is to come through a little more, just the shape of it. So I just amplify the whites a little bit on that. And yeah, I think that's pretty much, and then, you can take down other, like this might be too bright because it's kind of on the edge and it's not very helpful. I can just bring this back a little bit. But you can see how it's already, comparing to the original, it's a whole different picture. Sometimes also vignetting selectively on the edges. Again, you don't want the eye to go and get lost in those bright areas that are on the edge. You want to bring it back. You want to bring back the eye to the central action. So you can either do that back in Lightroom and paint it, a little bit on the edges, or you can do this here. I can just put a few spots, just bring back the edges wherever I've got, some brightness. So there you go. So now the eye is really going to that dog, and I can save from there. Go back to Lightroom. Here we go. So just let me move these. So there you go.
That's great.
So that's the story of that dog.
Yeah, I love how
handbag dog.
Yeah, I love how with Silver Efex Pro you can, have this real global control over your image. I mean, you can do it with all software, but when you first get into an image, you look at just this global approach to an image to give you that starting point of what the tones are that you want, etc., and then using those control points to really tell the story that you want to do. And I love what you said there about looking at the picture first and say, right, what is it I'm trying to say? What is it I'm trying to tell here, and what parts of that image do that for me, and then focus just on what's important in those specific parts. So yeah, really, really great demonstration on how to use that.
Right. Yeah, it's there's what I teach in my workshops to students is really to look for three things when they but it's all the way through the process. So to try to find something that will have an interesting design at an interesting moment, and where the information is easy to read. So I call that DIM, design information moment. And there's kind of the intersection of those three things. And you can see it in this image. It's all about that moment of that juxtaposition. But the information is made clear by the picture. I shot it in a way where the juxtaposition would be clear. So that's the information part. And the design is that, I've got some rule of thirds going on. I've got, just the way it's designed is also pleasant. So it's those three things. But then it's not just when you take the picture that DIM has to be present, it's also all the way through to editing. So when you look for the right picture to pick, what I mean by editing is not processing. I mean like picking the picture, you come back from your shoot with 400 photos. Which three are you going to pick? That's editing. And for editing, I go by the same standards of DIM. What has the best design information in moment. And then when I process, it's the same thing again. I'm looking to emphasize the design, the information in the moment. So that methodology is carried all the way through the whole photographic process.
Oh man, there's some great information. I love that approach. DIM is very interesting. I'll have to rewatch this episode myself and take that in a little bit more, just what you said there, because that really was very interesting. I wanted to point out before we wrap things up today, there's if people are really enjoying watching Dotan's work and getting a lot out of what he does, then obviously there's a couple of places where you can go to find out more. As I mentioned in the show, Dotan is a tutor at Leica Akademie, and you actually have an in-person workshop coming up this year.
That's right. Yeah, it's very exciting. We're starting them again, and it will be in September 9th through 12th. And it was just announced by Leica last week. We're just starting those workshops again, and we've already booked. I think there's only 4 spots left out of the 10.
Only 4, yeah.
So this one will sell out within the next couple of weeks, and we might program another one if this one sells out too fast. But yeah, if you're interested, Venice Beach, I mean, regardless of with me or without me, is a great place to shoot. But I know it like the back of my hand. So if you guys are curious and interested in coming over, it would be a pleasure to guide you there and show you some of my techniques.
That's exciting that we're getting back to doing in-person things. And obviously you also have your own street photography masterclass, and you have very kindly offered people viewing this episode of SmugMug Live a special discount to get 20% off your course. So if you head over to courses.dotansaguy.com and use the coupon code SmugMugLive20, you will get a 20% off of Dotan's course. So thank you so much for offering that to the viewers, Dotan. I really appreciate that. And I'll put that code in the link to that site in the description of this YouTube video for sure.
Thank you. And I just want to specify the online course is an online pre-recorded course that's actually 10 hours longer. I mean, there's a lot of small 4-minute videos, so it's very easy to follow, but it has basically everything I teach in my workshops. I teach in that online class, but there's also another benefit, which is I do every Thursday, we do office hours. So there's like a live 1-hour opportunity to ask questions. And yeah, it's more than just an online class, and it's people have been enjoying it a lot. I've got quite a few students in there. And
Yeah, a few
So
shout outs
anyway,
for it. Yeah, Dr. Howard says, I've learned a lot in his online seminar. So there you go.
all right.
He's really appreciated. Now, there's a couple of great comments that I favorited here, actually, when they came in. Something you mentioned really resonated with people. Both Kevin and Laurie said, what people are used to seeing, they can see on their own, is the quote that they're taking away from this. Number one takeaway quote, writing it down, says Kevin. And Laurie says, great tip on keeping in mind, showing something different. So yeah, if you want your work to be, to stop people and make them look, then it has to be something they're
Right.
not seeing with their own eyes, right? So
That's right. That's
couple of
right.
great takeaways there. So this is your very last call for questions. If you want to get your last question in, now is the time. While we're waiting to see if there's any more questions come in, one last plug from me to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. That way you'll be notified whenever we release another episode. This is the last one of this week. But if you've enjoyed this episode, then give Dotan a thumbs up here on this episode. It really would be much appreciated. So Dotan, we've mentioned your live workshop coming up, but what else? What's next for you? What do you got lined up?
Well, I've got this project on Venice dogs that I keep photographing. I've got a couple other documentary projects that I'm starting out also over the summer. So and a bunch of I've always got stuff going on in terms of shooting, and then in terms of teaching, I'm starting to try to schedule more workshops now that things are opening up. And so I'll keep people updated on that. I'm also going on a couple of other shows, B&H next week, and there's the Griffin Museum of Photography, who has a book event, and I'll be on that panel on Monday. So there's a lot going on. It's funny how like everything is kind of heating up right now at the same time.
Yeah, so
I guess people are
all
ready
kicking
to
off
get out again.
Yeah, oh boy, are
That's
we ready?
right.
Yeah, we are definitely ready. Well, listen. First of all, I really hope you get your camera back.
Yeah, it's safe. It's fine. I'll get it back. I don't know. I'm tempted to keep this one from Leica now. No, I don't want to.
Is that the R? Is that the M10R you have there?
That's the M10R. Yeah, there's like $8,000
files.
worth of plus the lens, and I'm gonna have to ship this back on Friday tomorrow.
Well, get your monochrome back in your hands first. That'll be.
That's right.
Get your babies back. Thank you to those of you saying how much they've enjoyed this show. We've really enjoyed having you join us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this episode. As always, wherever you are in the world, please, stay safe, be kind, look after each other, and please come back and join us on another episode of SmugMug Live very, very soon. Dotan, thank you so much. Look after yourself, my friend, and we'll see you on the next episode of SmugMug Live. Bye, everybody. Bye.